This is Chandragupta, the disciple of Bhadrabahu, has been identified as a Chandragupta Maurya. This led to the contemporaneity of Mahavir and Buddha. Since your model is you have to follow, it became like a Bible where if it is written wrong also you have to follow it. So this is the serious problem, but nobody talks about such serious, because you have a privilege now to reject any data saying that Alberuni may not be knowing the entire data. This is the problem. Archaeology can be a supporting evidence to chronology, cannot be a primary evidence. So first you have to establish, because the continuous civilizations chronology has to be established from the traditional literary sources first. Then investigate, the archaeological investigate has to support how that chronology is more authentic. The chronology is a totally very vast subject. So I just next, because the chronology is the backbone of history. The historical narrative has to be told in a chronological perspective. The historical narrative may not be consistent or scientifically acceptable. The real problem with the what happened, because last 400 years of, because prior to 1500 BC, sorry, 1500 AD, or last 500 years before, every civilization followed their own traditional chronology. But due to the this advent of the Christianity and the Christian historians, they started reconciling the biblical timelines, because they have to reconcile the Egyptians, Sumerians, Assyrians, then the Jewish chronology. That led to the reconciliation of entire world chronology based on the certain sheet anchors. But behind that scientific investigation, there was some doubting syndrome, because they had that biblical mindset that 4000 BC was the only creation date. So another 1000 years, maybe the after 1000 years, the flood. So no civilizational existence is possible beyond 3000 BC. With that mindset, they started doubting any dates are, like if I say in the Arin and Megasthenes, what they say, India has a history of at least 6451 years before Alexander, and 153, a list of 153 king. So it's, I'm giving we have indigenous so many sources, literature, inscriptions, many things. But I'm quoting the Western source to indicate that before the advent of the Christianity, there was a very all civilizational history starting from the Holocene, they have the chronology. And same thing has been mentioned by the Aryan in Anabasis Alexander. Actually, Greeks are talking about three invasions on India, means Afghanistan side. First happened Dionysus or Bacchus, 6400 years before Alexander. So India never existed as per the modern historians beyond 1500 BC. Then I don't know whom they have invaded. And second was the Hercules. And the third one was the Alexander. Now, I'm actually taking more liberty to talk before the renowned archaeologist, because the chronology is the backbone of the history. So here, the Indo-Greek kings, we always date all Indo-Greeks came only after Alexander. And Alexander date is 323 BC. This led to a huge chronological problem in our traditional history. First, I'm certain numerous unsolved puzzles still exist even after 400 years of scientific investigation. If there may be a possibility that we may be following a wrong path or wrong sheet anchors, that is leading to us these unresolved puzzles in our chronology, not only in the Western chronology also. If you go to second millennium BC, everything is, you can roughly say it, there is no way you can give any absolute dates. The first problem was in our traditional, the Mahabharata was occurred somewhere 32nd century BC. Buddha's date was somewhere 19th and 18th century BC. Then Mahapadmananda after 1500 years. Then Mauryas. Then Adi Shankaracharya in 6th century BC. This was our traditional chronology before the arrival of the colonial rulers in India. But what modern textbooks teach us, that Mahabharata war, they have no date, nothing, because they think whether it may be mythical, it may be historical, whatever it is, but they don't have any date. They start with the Buddha. Beyond Buddha, it is prehistory, means we don't have any chronological history. And this led to a chronological error of 1381 years. When you date Buddha 483 BC, traditional date what I have arrived at 1864 BC, the Nirvana, the difference is 1381 years. It's a huge chronological problem. The second puzzle is the traditional history before the arrival of colonial rulers. Vikramaditya 57 BC, thousands of inscriptions we have, epigraphic evidence, literary evidence that existence of the King Vikramaditya in the first century BC and Navaratnas. And there is a enormous evidence, epigraphic and the literature, they indicate two Shaka Samvats existed, but in modern textbooks, only one Shaka Samvat 78 AD. So naturally, they said that when Kalidasa, even Varahamihira, they're referring to Shaka Samvat, how can you date in the first century BC? We had no answer because we have forgotten the ancient epoch of the Shaka Samvat. So I have established that there was an ancient Shaka Samvat that commenced in 583 BC. Second was an astronomical epoch commenced in 78 AD. Inadvertently mixed up the both because entire South India they refer to any Samvat as a Shaka. Even today they say Shaka means it is synonymous to era. This is a massive problem mixing up the two epochs into one. 661 years of chronological history has been brought forward. Then another problem is the Chandragupta of Ujjain. There was another Chandragupta, who was a Gupta Chandragupta, means the Malava Guptas, and it is he was a disciple of Bhadrabahu. But the problem is the disciple of Bhadrabahu has been identified as Chandragupta Maurya based on the Hemachandras, because Jain historians, later Jain historians, because in the Harivansha Purana, Tiloya Pannati, there is no reference of Mauryas. They refer to Shaka Murundas only. And later, the Hemachandra and Jain historians identified Chandragupta, the disciple of Bhadrabahu, who became Jain monk. His name was Vishakhacharya, and they came to Shravanabelgola in Karnataka. Still, there is a Chandragupta cave and the Bhadrabahu cave. Still, you can go and visit those places. But this mistaken identification made Buddha and Mahavira contemporaries. So there was a difference of more than 600 to 700 years between Buddha and Mahavira. They were not contemporaries. These two mistakes led to another additional, the total 1381 years chronological problem. Another problem, this has been created by the colonial rulers. They wanted to identify who was the Sandracotus, because they came here to find the roots and evidences about the Alexander's invasion. But tradition, there is no reference of Alexander in Indian tradition because it's a very minor event. So we had no, and it has nothing to do with our chronology. But as per traditional chronology, it was somewhere 1600 BC. This was the date of Chandragupta Maurya as per our traditional sources. Now the problem is we have dated Alexander in 323 BC. How we have dated? Just we have assumed that first date is the Jesus birth. So Alexander died 323 years before Jesus birth. That's why 323 BC. Now this problem is actually because traditional Indian chronology has nothing to do with the Greece chronology at all. We followed Indian sheet anchors, all eras, even from the Yudhishthira Samvat, and we have a Kali Yuga Samvat, and numerous Indian epochs. Based on that, we had our chronology. But since there are numerous references in the Western sources about the Alexander's invasion to during the time of Chandragupta, now the problem is when you date Alexander 323, then Puranic chronology is totally fictitious. So colonial rulers, they gave more weightage to the Western sources and then rejected the traditional sources that your chronology is totally wrong. So they came up to the chronology up to, because they identified Sandracotus is the Chandragupta Maurya. So that's why Chandragupta Maurya has to be dated 323 BC, around 1 or 2 years plus minus. With that assumption, you have brought forward the Indian chronology by 1300 years, and then you have a huge gap between Mahabharata and that. Then you have rejected every history beyond Buddha as just as a prehistory or a mythical, or it's just you have winded up from Vedas to Buddha within 1000 years, then declared that Vedas were written somewhere 1500 to 1000 BC. Now the problem is, if we accept, because we have to establish the history, chronological history of Alexander and the Indo-Greeks. There is archaeological evidence, especially for the Indo-Greeks. We have numerous coins and numerous references. Even Yuga Purana of Indian sources have the references. Even our Ashokan inscriptions refers to the Yavana kings and others. So you can't escape from the reconciling the world chronology when you did go back to the traditional chronology. So this way we have to reconcile the entire world chronology. What I have done, instead of going to the modern sheet anchors, I followed investigating the authenticity of the traditional chronologies. There is a need to do. Then I found that three monumental blunders, I am saying very responsibly, committed by the modern historians. What is first? They have mixed up the two Shakairas into one. This led to 661 years error. Second, this came with the jail. These two are committed by ourselves. We have done it because we generally followed Shaka calendar traditionally. Then that astronomers, Indian astronomers, reset the Shaka Samvat in 78 AD because 1st April 78 AD was the conjunction of Sun, Moon, Brihaspati, Sun, Moon, and Jupiter on Chaitra Shukla Pratipada. So we were looking for a perfect conjunctions to start a calendar having a perfect calculations, because our all astrology and astronomy is based on the very accurate calculations. But what happened? This both Shaka Samvat got mixed up. Then this Buddha Mahavira problem came due to the Jain historians identified, because that time Chandragupta Maurya was only a famous king in India due to Mudra Rakshasam, other Natakas. Then third is, this is the serious problem with the Western chronology. They have what they did, Anno incarnation, means the birth year of Jesus. And the Dionysus exiguus come out of with the Anno Domini, which is actually Easter computers. Both got mixed up and then said both are identical. But my investigation, this both are not identical First CE 1 AD, what we are following is actually an Easter. It is Irish computers of Easter dates, that is 84 12 1 year cycle. And another problem is, the modern historians think Diocletian era and Martyrs era are identical. This is the reason why I think one German scholar came up with the phantom time hypothesis. Some 300 years been mixed up. I think somebody has actually dated himself in 1000 BC, though 1000 AD, though he lived somewhere 700 AD. This kind of some phantom time hypothesis. Investigating all three, it will take enormous time. I'll just go one by one. Why I'm saying that there were two Shakairas. If you see, there is a one inscription found in southern Karnataka. It is referring to Shaka 2027. Now, in Karnataka 1 and 2, you are writing totally differently. There is no way you can say it's a scribble error. So 2027, if you had 78 2105, it means this inscription is a future. You have to wait another 70 80 years. Another inscription, Vijayanagara, it is referring to Shaka 1975. It is 2053, means another 30 years you have to wait for this inscription. And another Hoysala inscription is referring to 1919. It is 1997. I don't think probably the Devagoda was the chief minister that time. Not any Hoysala king was ruling in Karnataka. Then historians came up, means the colonial historians came up with the forged inscriptions. Many inscriptions have been forged. These are the Pimplenair grant. It is dated in Shaka 310. If you add 78, 388. But it is written in Nagari script. How Nagari script was evolved in 388. So that's why it is forgery. So they declared it as a forgery because you can't date so early Chalukya King Satyashraya, since it is written in Nagari. What I'm saying, this is actually referring to first into 78 AD epoch, not the 583 BC. If you differentiate, then you can what I did, I have almost investigated more than 20,000 inscriptions published with reference to those inscriptions refer to the Shaka Samvat. There are numerous inconsistencies, even astronomical details as well as the dating. But when you segregate all inscription to two categories, into the ancient Shaka era and the later Shaka era, then you can reconcile every inscription perfectly. Then what would be the best model? If your model is rejecting lot of data, there may be something wrong in your model. Don't reject the data. But in the colonial timelines, what we did, we rejected the data, whatever if it is not following their model of chronology. So, and this inscription referred to a solar eclipse, and that perfectly matches with the 18th August 388. But historians thought it's a forgery. There are 6 inscriptions, copper plate inscriptions have been found, where the Vinayaditya inscriptions are all, these are all 6 inscriptions written in Devanagari script, Nagari script. But these inscriptions refer to Shaka. What I did, I just differentiated Shaka Shakanta to make it 583 BC as a Shaka, 78 as a Shakanta. Because Bhaskaracharya mentions Shakanipas Syante Kaler Vatsara. He is actually referring to 78 AD as Shakanripas Syante. So that's why I made it Shakanta. So these all 6 copper plate grants have been rejected as a forgery. Why? Because written in Devanagari, but dated in a very earlier than the early Chalukyas. Their inscriptions have been written in southern script. This is the recently found copper plate. 2 copper plates have been found in Talagunda in Karnataka. One copper plate is referring to is the Kalachuri king Chankama. It is dated Shaka 1102. And another copper plate is Vinayaditya, is written Shaka 520. And both have been written the same script. It is not possible. There is a difference of 600 years on in both inscriptions. And there are cross references also. I have seen the borders of the land piece. Same borders have been mentioned here also, and there is a cross reference because this Shaka 1102 has been given to a grandfather, and Shakanta 520 has been given to a grandson to there is a 3 generations difference. Now the historians have no other option to reject this Vinayaditya 520 as a forgery, because you cannot have a how to explain this. So it is this 520 is referring to a solar eclipse, and it exactly matches 30th April 599 C. If you differentiate between Shaka and Shakanta, then both copper plates are valid and authentic. We have just forwarded the Chalukya chronology by 661 years, assuming the only 78 AD. This is the reason why Varahamira is referring to 427 Shaka, but still he was living in the 1st century BC. You start from 583 BC, then he is referring to a date around 156 BC as an epoch for in his Pancha Siddhantika. I'll tell you these are the 30. There are many more, but I could only access to the what inscriptions have been published and available in the public domain. All these 30 inscriptions are dated before 1336. So modern historians teach us that Vijayanagara established only 1336. Before the Vijayanagara did not exist. If so, then why Shaka 1104 is referring to Bukka Bhupati Raya? These are the 30 inscriptions I'm saying, all dated before 1336. Means all 30 are forgeries. So they simply reject. Don't talk about these inscriptions at all. Another 45 Vijayanagara inscriptions are inconsistent with the chronology. How? Like one inscription is dated 1270, it means 1348, but it is referring to Achyuta Devaraya. Who Achyuta Devaraya was there just beginning of the Vijayanagara? It was Harihara Bukka. That is the only possible. There is another inscription 1291 is referring to King Krishna Raya. There are 10 I have listed, but there are 42, 45. And there is a copper plate in Kudali Mutt. Kudali Mutt is in Sringeri. It's another Shankaracharya Mutt. They have one copper plate 1073, and it is referring to Vidyaranya, Vijayanagara, Vidyashankara, Sringeri Mutt. So this copper plate is already there in Sringeri. Now the Firishta, he is the Muslim historian. He is referring to Vijayanagara having more than 700 years of history before 14th century. It means Vijayanagara had 1000 years of history, not 300 years. This is the reason hundreds of inscriptions have been rejected that Vijayanagara, because finally when you compress the chronology where 583 BC brought forward 78 AD, then what happens? Entire medieval chronology got mixed up. So these are huge. The even literature as literary evidences, even all Vanshavalis of the various this five 550 princely states. The chronology is available. At least more than 100 or 120 princely state chronologies are available, but we always reject their because let us see only this Bhadoria Rajputs. They start their history from the Chauhan king Manik Rai. Who was this Manik Rai? 700 AD onwards, they have the chronological history, but we reject their entire Vanshavali because it don't fit into your chronology. And what I did, how I arrived this 583 BC, there is a one Kurtakoti, one copper plate. It is referring to a total solar eclipse occurred in Vaishakha Masa. And this total solar eclipse, because what I did, taking the longitude, latitude of Badami in northern Karnataka, how many total solar eclipses occurred between 500 BC to 500 AD in 3000 years? These are only 10 solar eclipses occurred in northern Karnataka. Only one date matches with reference to that date. That is 9th May 53 BC. So you have to add this 530 years to 53 BC, 583 BC. So this is how we can discover the lost epoch of ancient Shaka Samvat. And these two monumental blunders, what I am saying, that 583 BC is the Shaka Samvat established by the Shaka kings, whereas the second, that 78 AD, is Indian astronomers established this epoch. This is the reason all Indian astronomers who wrote astronomical text after 78 AD, they refer to only 78 AD as an epoch. This is the serious problem that led to 661 years chronological problem. And the second blunder is, this is Chandragupta, the disciple of Bhadrabahu, has been identified as a Chandragupta Maurya. This led to the contemporaneity of Mahavir and Buddha. Now let us find out how the modern historians arrived the date of Buddha. They just first refer to only Greek literature. It means that it is appears in says that only Indian chronology has to be established from the Greek sources. So the death of Alexander is the sheet anchor. So that's why you have established the coronation of Chandragupta Maurya. You have no evidence how to date Chandragupta's coronation, but somehow you both are contemporaries, and Chandragupta, Sandrakotas and Seleucus stories, and then you have manufactured a chronology saying that Chandragupta, then Bindusara, then you come out of a gap of 4 years, then Ashoka with the 36 years. Then you have referred to the Sri Lankan sources, that is Mahavansha, 218th year of Buddha Nirvana. Ashoka was coronated. This is how the Ashoka's date was established. Then the finally it leads to a 486 BC, then referred to the Chinese dotted record of Canton, the 975 dots. I hope you are aware of the story of this Canton record. Then for 483 BC. If you see either Greek sources, Sri Lankan, and the Chinese sources, these were the sources based on the Buddha's date has been arrived at 483 BC. But Burmese and Sri Lankan inscriptions, I found 19 inscriptions in which the both epochs have been mentioned: Buddha Dhamma era and Shaka era. The difference between these two are 1182 years. So now, if Shaka era is 78 AD, you go back to 1182 years, then it would be 12th century BC. If it is 583 BC, you had 1182, it goes to 18th, 19th century BC. But now, the historians concocted that the Shakaira mentioned in this Burmese Sri Lankan inscriptions is not Shaka Samvat, it's some Burmese era that commenced somewhere in an epoch, Burmese era. But actually, if you see, it is they are referring to the Buddha Dhamma era, 1765 BC. So the fictional chronology, what we are this Buddha Varsha, they say that it is the epoch of Burmese era, 638 AD. Because since you have brought forward Indian chronology by 1381 years. So you have no other option to say that Shakaira mentioned in Burmese and Sri Lankan inscription is not Shaka Samvat, some other epoch that commenced somewhere in 638 AD. Now they added 1182, so it became 544 BC. So this is the traditional chronology. Generally, the historians claim, and they reduce another 60 years. I don't know what reason, since they have to reconcile the Ashoka's date with reference to the Alexander date and others. So this is how they arrived 483 BC. But traditional chronology, even the inscriptional chronology says there is a difference of Buddha Dhamma and Buddha Nirvana. Both are different because Buddha Dhamma is actually beginning of the Theravada. Theravada separated from Mahasanghikas after 100 years of Buddha Nirvana. So you have to add another 100 years. So 1282 years. This is how that's why there is a clash between long chronology, short chronology. This is the real reason, because Ashoka, after 100 years of Buddha Nirvana, he was the Kala Ashoka, and Ashoka from Buddha Dhamma Theravada epoch to he was the Mauryan Ashoka. There were two Ashokas mentioned in Mahavansha, Deepavansha, as well as the all North Indian Buddhist sources. They refer to Ashoka, who was the Shishunaga Putra. He was not a Bindusara Putra. He was the Shishunaga Putra, and he lived 100 years after Buddha Nirvana. So we have no other option to reject some data. So it is very selective acceptance, selective rejection. Since you have a particular model of chronology, then you started rejecting the data. So there is a serious problem in our data. So that's why I said both chronologies are correct, short chronology and long chronology. Short chronology is referring to the Kala Ashoka, where the long chronology is referring to Mauryan Ashoka. Then another one para, I'll just refer it to the Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni, you know his date. What he's saying, in former times, Khurasan, Persia, Iraq, Mosul country up to the frontiers of Syria was Buddhistic in the first chapter. But then Zoroaster went forth from Azerbaijan and preached Maghism in the Balk. It is clear he is saying Buddhism existed before the birth of the Zarathustra. But what modern historian teach you? That Zoroaster died before the birth of Buddha. How Buddhism could spread up to Syria? Since your model is you have to follow, like it became like a Bible where if it is written wrong also you have to follow it. So this is the serious problem, but nobody talks about such serious, because you have a privilege now to reject any data, saying that Al-Biruni may not be knowing the entire data. Then recent excavations at Lumbini, probably 10 years before, this one University of UK, they have come out with the OSL dating and carbon dating in the Trench 5 that lead to much beyond, I think, 1300, 1400, 1500 BC. Then they came out with some early cult existed, because Buddhism never existed beyond 500 BC. So now you have no other option to say some early cult existed. Even though you find any archaeological evidence, since you don't know the history, you will say some other cult might have been existed. No, this is the problem. Archaeology can be a supporting evidence to chronology, cannot be a primary evidence. So first you have to establish, because the continuous civilizations chronology has to be established from the traditional literary sources first. Then investigate, the archaeological investigate has to support how that chronology is more authentic. This is how the Buddha Nirvana, and there are many new astronomical references in Sanyukta Nikaya, that the day, in the year Buddha attained Nirvana, just before 1 or 2 months, 3 months before, he was at Shravasti. Then he was coming to Kushinagara. They're referring to a lunar eclipse followed by solar eclipse. These references are there. Chandima Sukta, Suriya Sukta, these two suttas are there in that Sanyukta Nikaya. And these both solar eclipses can be established, the date what I am saying, because I have established the timeline based on the epigraphic evidence. Then I am establishing the astronomical evidences based on the literary sources. And another three eclipses mentioned in Mahavansha, because the Buddha visited Sri Lanka just 7 or 8 years after attaining his enlightenment, when he was 35 years old. This is how we can arrive the absolute dates of Buddha. So there is an absolute chronology is available in Indian sources. Now the problem is, if I am changing any date of Buddha, then it will affect the complete world chronology, I have to reconcile the entire world chronology, entire Western chronology, and I have to reconcile the chronology of Sri Lanka, Burma, Tibet, China, Southeast Asia. In a way, except America, I have to reconcile entire chronology. That also I have, I did it. Now I'm coming out with the book on the historical chronology of the world. How this first AD fashion, this actually first AD obsession came only after this James Ussher and Lightfoot and Newton. These three, they came up with the 16th, 17th century. Thereafter, they thought first AD is our era. Anybody ever investigated. Nobody even asked what is an archaeological evidence. Even you, the biblical, astronomical, the Star of Bethlehem, anything you can establish, nothing. Since you are following first AD, that is sacrosanct. No, you started rejecting every traditional chronology. Even Chinese chronology is not inconsistent in the first. Indian chronology is not there. This is how I said the traditional chronology is authentic. And then finally comes with the Aratta. What I'm saying, this Aratta reference is Aratta and Scythian, because the Persians, ancient Persians, they refer to the Sistan and Scythians, and the Sumerian sources, they refer to Aratta land. That Aratta and Scythians are Afghanistan area, and the so-called the Indus Valley civilization, जिस जो हम कहते हैं कि उसके बाद ही शायद इंडियंस आसमान से टपके एंड देन इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन का उद्भव हुआ. This is actually in between Ramayana era, Mahabharata era, this one. And these sources refer to land of Arattas. Even the Easter, you know that Easter, the deity of the Sumerians and all, she was the sister of an Aratta king. And the Arattas are contemporaries of Enmerikar and even the Gilgamesh story that is linked to that Easter. So the Aratta and Scythians, they were Mlechas. For Indians, always consider the Western, especially the Afghanistan. The people, they are always related to us because they mixed up with the Western, other civilizational people. So that's why we generally kept them as Mlechas. So they used to follow a language which is maybe Paishachi, and they followed this logosyllabic script. And the horse, which unicorn, we need to investigate whether it may be a shivalic horse. In archaeologically, it has been established that the shivalic horse, numerous evidences from Tamil Nadu to from northern India, numerous archaeological evidences are there shivalic horse, which had 34 ribs. And Rigveda refers to Ashwa Sukta, an Ashwa having 34 ribs. But modern horse, it is actually Central Asian horse, it has 36 ribs. And one more thing, the Rigveda refers to Hiranya Shringa, Tava Shringani. So possibly unicorn, maybe, probably an animal existed, but during that Holocene period, it became extinct. And we had that memory, and that's why Scythians were the horse breeders. Initially, they bred this shivalic horse. Later, the Central Asian horses, they became the breeders of those horses. So this is the Indian history. It goes beyond almost 10,000 BC in our history, but we can establish very perfect chronology starting from Mahabharata till date. Only this 81 years that can be perfectly reconciled. This medieval chronology from that needs to be reconciled, entire world chronology. The 661 years problem I found all pervasive, even Western side also there is the same chronological error is there. So it needs a broad, I think, a comprehensive investigation, because chronology is a big jigsaw puzzle. You can't, if you are disturbing one piece, the onus is on us to you have to establish entire that jigsaw puzzle again. But why not we restart again our investigation, without disturbing the modern. Let us, because modern chronology is not perfect. There are numerous errors. So there is a need to restart our investigation into a true chronology. Probably we will solve it. And as per my investigation, the three blunders, if we correct it, we can establish a perfect world chronology, including Indian chronology. Thank you.